So Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. Love to learn a little bit about you. Actually, I was going to say, Jeff, if you can give us a 30-second, overview of your background. Maybe you need a little bit longer than 30 seconds. It would help our audience just to kind of understand who you are and your decades of experience, not years, decades.
Well, that makes me feel really old. So thanks a lot. But when I graduated from college, my first job out of college was selling the incredibly sexy product, and please don't be jealous of this, of brown corrugated shipping boxes.
Wow.
And I was fortunate to go to work for Georgia Pacific doing that.
GP.
Yeah, GP. And they had this amazing training program. And so we got to work in every department within the company, accounting, customer service, down on the factory floor, even delivering the truckloads of boxes. So I got to really understand the business. And part of the sales training program was to go through and get trained in all these different sales methodologies. So I did the KRS negotiating seminar. I did crew positional selling, I did Dale Carnegie, and I did Sandler. And so I got this amazing background of training and became very, very much helped me become a lifelong learner. And so I've been through a lot of different sales training and taken bits and pieces from different things and eventually really settled that Sandler was the one that worked the best for me. And so I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in marketing, I've worked in services industries, I've worked in technology for a long time. And finally, I've kept building businesses for other people. And we build up revenue and do these great things. And the companies would make a lot of money, but me, not so much. And so I finally said, wow, this is crazy. Why don't I go out on my own and build something for myself? And when I started to look around and what to do, and the fact that there was a Sandler franchise available here in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live, it just became a no-brainer for me that I love training, I love working with people, and I love helping salespeople get better. And I really have a passion around helping companies put a repeatable, predictive process into place. It was kind of a no-brainer. My wife is a little bit crazy. So when I went to her and I said, hey, you know how I hate my job because I travel 30 weeks a year? And she said, yeah. I said, how about if I go from making absolutely silly money in tech to starting my own business and making zero? And my wife looked me in the eyes and said, wow, that's a great idea. And I looked at her and said, really? And she said, yeah, you're a great salesperson. You're a great trainer. You'll crush it. And she, of course, like everything else, she was right.
No, that's awesome. And I know you worked at other sales training companies as well. How was that like compared to Sandler?
They were all great experiences. And, I still have a lot of good friends from the different companies I've worked with in these other sales training companies. And their methodologies, they're all good. I think Sandler's the best, but they're all good. Most people don't have a truly repeatable process.
Sure.
And so anything you do is good. I think Sandler's the best because Sandler's not only repeatable, but it's predictive in nature.
Right. And also of the reinforcement part, sales training, it's not a quarterly activity or semi-annual activity. Get everybody together and say, we're going to train you. All right. See you next year.
Yeah. And I think that's where some of our competitors fall down a little bit, right? Is that there's a 1 day, 2 day boot camp, maybe a 3 day boot camp, and in some extreme circumstances, a 1 week boot camp. But then there's no reinforcement training along the way. It'd be like going to the gym. Well, it is. It's exactly like the people who back when we used to be able to go to the gym, it's the people that show up in January at the gym every year. And week 1 in January, it's packed. Week 2, it's still pretty packed, but not as packed as it was in week 1. Week 3, it's a little less packed. By the middle of February, it's back to how it was last June. And it's like the people that show up in January at the gym, they work out for 1 week, 2 weeks, and then they stop. And they wonder why they can't do what they used to do. And so sales is the same thing. It's just like building muscles in the gym. If your sales skills and your sales techniques don't get practiced and reinforced regularly, of course they're going to fall off and they're not going to be as sharp as they should be.
Yeah, no. And also being in the Bay Area, you're dealing with so many tech companies that hire literally anyone off of college graduate. You might come across a lot of folks that are new. What are some silly mistakes that they make, Jeff? Being in this business for so many years, what can someone, they have to do an SDR job. That's the SDR and AE. It's like it's a factory, right? You work in this job for 10 months and you hope to become an AE or get fired. One or the other is going to happen.
Well, there's a couple mistakes that the SDRs make. There's some mistakes that companies make too, but some of the mistakes the SDRs make is they believe that there's a correlation between how much they talk, how much information they give out, and the sales that they'll get. And that is absolutely not true. It's actually the inverse. As a sales professional, we are paid much more for the information we gather than the information we disperse. And so we want to talk less and listen more. And when we do that, our sales actually jump up, because in the end, people buy for their reasons, not ours. And they care about their problems. They don't care about the features and benefits of whatever product or service we're selling. So that's one mistake that new SDRs make. The second mistake they make is they start to emulate somebody else on the team who's doing something without any kind of formal training. They're emulating them, and it ends up being like a bad photocopy, right? And they don't build a truly repeatable process. They'll jump from this one to this one to this one. It becomes a copycat business. That just doesn't work. You need to have a firm process that is based on science, because sales is a science, that will help you build a repeatable, consistent process that leads to sales decisions. And then the third thing is they kind of live off of they live off of hopium, right? And their ears kind of hear yes, even when yes is a no. And most salespeople are terrified, especially new ones. They're terrified of getting a no. A no is a gift from God,
I agree.
right? Because we don't have to chase them anymore. I've never seen any salesperson. I've trained thousands of salespeople. I've never seen any salesperson that got fired for getting too many no's. I've seen tons of them. I've seen hundreds of them get fired for getting too many maybes.
Right.
And maybe is the death knell as a salesperson. You want to get to know as quickly as possible. And that's one of the things I love about Sandler. Sandler is more of a disqualification system than a qualification system. In Sandler, we tell you your customer has to earn the right to get your presentation. We should never suffer from PPS, right? Which is premature presentation syndrome, which a lot of new salespeople suffer from. And so the customer has to qualify all the way through before we present them anything. And so I think those are the three big mistakes that new salespeople make.
That was awesome. And being in Sandler so long, any rules that you like to live by? Well, I'm sure there's a lot of them, but if there's one that you can pick, Jeff, what would that be?
Of the Sandler rules, for me, it's leave your child in the car, what we call transactional analysis.
Right. I like that one. Do you want to expound a little bit on that for someone who may not know? What does that mean? Jeff said to leave the kid in the car.
Yes. So first of all, it's a rule that was developed a long time ago, and it's a horrible rule. It sounds like a horrible rule now, right? Leave your child in the car. Please don't ever leave your actual child or any animal in the car. But what transactional analysis is, it's an old psychology theory. And, it's funny, my son is taking psychology this summer because he doesn't want to have to take it as a 12th grader this coming fall. And he came home the other day and told me, hey, Dad, we learned about something called transactional analysis. And it's really cool. And I said, oh, wow, tell me more. And he said, transactional analysis is about the voices in our head. And, that can sound kind of bad. But what it is that what transactional analysis says is that you have three voices in your head. You have a parent voice, you have an adult voice, and you have a child voice in your head. And if you think about it, it's kind of like when you were born, you had a recording device that clicked on to record the moment that you were born. And it does nothing but record for like about the first 5 years of your life. And, think about what a baby to 5 hears. They hear things like, they hear, I love you, you're cute. They also hear, no, don't touch that, stop, right? And so that's what we call the parent voice. And so somewhere around the age of 5, that recording device in their head clicks off and goes into a continual playback loop for the rest of your life. And so the things you heard play in your head for the rest of your life and kind of become a basis for how the window through which you view the world. And so, when you were young, Timothy, your parents told you don't talk to.
Yep, 100%. Don't talk to strangers.
And they said never get in a stranger's
car.
They told you it's rude to talk about
money.
Yeah. And so naturally, you went into a job where you had to talk to strangers and you had to talk about money. And so here's the thing. We can blame our parents for these things, for these voices in our head, these critical parent voices in our head. But The reality is we still have to overcome them because, listen, you ever taken an Uber or a Lyft?
Yep. We're in strangers' car all the time.
You get in strangers' cars all the time. So you've overcome that little bit of pearl of wisdom from mom and dad, probably to mom and dad's chagrin. So it's your responsibility to come around about overcoming the fear of talking to strangers and really overcoming the fear about talking about money. And so those voices in our head help us to form things. And then, you have the adult voice in your head, which is just kind of non-emotional, all fact-based. The important part about the adult voice in the head is this is where decisions are made. This voice in our head is the one that makes the good decisions with fact-based decisions. And so for you salespeople listening to this, that's where buying decisions are made with their adult voice. And then finally, you have the child voice. And so we say, leave your child in the car. What we mean by that is don't come into the call with your child voice going. Because child voice is all about wants and needs and desires. And so you don't ever want to use your child in a sales call. However, it's your job as a sales professional to get your client into their child voice or their child persona as quickly as you can, because that's where wants, needs, and desires are. And what we need to define from them is what are their wants, needs, and desires. So we need to start all of our customers in their child persona or their child voice. And we do that by using a nurturing parent voice. And so people ask me all the time, what's nurturing parent? What's critical parent? Is it okay if I tell a short story?
Please. Love stories here.
Okay. So my son wanted to play football when he was younger. And I've got a lot of friends who used to play football and are still working with the NFL in different ways. And none of them let their kids play football, contact football. And so I figured they know more about this than anybody else. And so I wouldn't let my son play contact football. So we decided to play flag football. And in flag football, it's different than contact. And so one of the most important positions in flag football is center, because if the ball hits the ground on a snap on the way back to the quarterback, it's a dead ball. You lose the down. You end up having to turn the ball over to the other team. And center is also a receiver eligible position on a flag football team. And so my son was playing center for us. He had not had a bad snap all year. We were in the championship game, and Matt, our quarterback, got behind center in a shotgun and called out the signals, and Jack's first snap went 6 feet over Matt's head.
Oh, no.
His second snap bounced twice on the way back to Matt. His third snap would have been perfect if Matt had lined up 3 feet to the right where Jack snapped the ball. And so Jack had 3 straight bad snaps. We turned the ball over. On his way off the field, I'm the head coach. He is doing everything in his power not to look at me. I hooked him around the shoulders and I said to him, hey, bud, listen. A, I love you. B, we can't have any more bad snaps. I need you to get over there with Matt, our quarterback, on the sidelines and work it out. Okay? He goes, okay, coach. And so he gets 3 steps past me, and I hear my wife's voice come from the stands. Jack, suck less.
Ooh.
And so my wife chose that moment to be a critical parent, suck less. I was more of a nurturing parent in that moment. I had my times as a critical parent, and just telling them, hey, I love you. We got to work it out, right? And so you need to start in a nurturing parent voice. I don't necessarily need you to tell your customer or client or prospect that you love them, but you need to ask nurturing questions that allow them to feel safe to tell you their needs, wants, and desires from their child voice in their head. And then once you have all those needs, wants, and desires, once you're sure you've got them all, and here's how you find out. Every time they tell you a need, want, or desire, you're going to say, oh, wow, that sounds important to me. Tell me more about that. And then after they do, you're going to say to them, okay, is there anything else? And you're going to keep saying anything else until they have nothing else. And then it is your job for you to come down to adult from nurturing parent and for you to raise them up from child to adult. So you have an adult to adult conversation and you have equal business stature, because that's where buying decisions are made. Buying decisions are not made in the need, wants, and desires stage. They're made in the adult stage.
That takes quite a lot of training. Jeff, I
It
can
does.
imagine.
But it truly is a learned skill. And
Right.
so it's nothing that you can't learn. But what doesn't belong in the sales call, and the reason we call it leave your child in the car, is the salesperson should never bring their needs, wants, and desires in the car. And too many do, or into the sales call, because we all know those folks, right? We've all experienced them. They kind of have commission breath when they talk to the
Right.
prospect, and the prospect can smell it on them. And so the minute our needs and wants, desires are taking precedence in the sales call, we've already lost.
I agree. No, that's a really great point. Me being on the marketing consulting side of things, one of the things I struggle with, or our team and in our industry in general, is that we have businesses that would call us primarily for free consulting. They pretend that, hey, we got huge goals for this quarter. What do you think we should do? And guess what? We as consultants love to talk about. Hey, you should run Google ads, man. You should do Facebook. You should do this. You need to make videos. And we just go on for 45 minutes, not even really see if the prospect is still there. How do you change that, right? You know what I'm saying? From being an unpaid consultant to actually, like you said, understanding, is there even a fit for this customer? Can we even help them?
Yeah, I think that's really important. We get, as salespeople, we get really excited when somebody expresses interest in what we do.
Right.
It's like we want to share, we want to tell them what we know. And it just, when you start down that path, it's a slippery slope, and all of a sudden you're giving away all your magic sauce for free.
The candies.
And so, there's two things in Sandler, right? I said earlier, you're paid more for the information you collect than the information you give out. That's one Sandler rule that I think is really important to understand as a salesperson, that you need to collect information before you give anything out. And the second one is, listen, we are not in the nonprofit give it away business. We are salespeople. There is, in politics, quid pro quo is a bad term, right? But in business, quid pro quo is the norm. You're going to give something for something. A lot of times it's money. And so anytime you're going to give anybody anything, you have to collect something in return. You don't just say, oh, hey, you should run Google AdWords. You should do LinkedIn video. You should
post 5 times a day.
Yeah, right. Whatever it is, right? But we don't give away the secret sauce. We get something in return. And does it always have to be money? No. But it should. Money's good. I like money, because money helps me buy stuff, and I like buying stuff. So money's good. Sometimes I might do a little bit of consulting work in exchange for referrals, because I know that referrals close at a really high rate. And I, like everybody else, I'm not a big fan of cold calling. I do it when I have to, but I'd much rather get referrals. I'll do it in exchange for a chance to expand my relationship with an account. If I'm in with the SDR team in an account and there's a little bit of unpaid consulting work they're asking for, I might do some consulting work, not unpaid, but in exchange for a meeting with the CRO or the VP of sales, or so I can expand the relationship to the whole sales team. So anytime you're going to give something, make sure you're getting something of equal value in return.
I love that. And the second phase of that, when I'm talking to this business owner, is, why don't you send me a proposal? So now we're going to write an essay with everything that company or this client in that industry should do. And you don't need me to finish this. That's the next automatic mistake consultants make. Custom proposals too.
Not only consultants, any salesperson, right? They get very excited. Oh, that sounds great. I don't see any reason why we went into business. I'll just need you to send me over a deck, or I'll just need you to send me over a proposal. Folks, if they're not willing to participate in the development of the proposal, you need to stop, because they're not serious. They have to be willing to participate in that proposal, and they have to be willing to have qualified. And so I think I said before, every
disqualification. Yeah, we're trying to disqualify.
You have to disqualify them. You have to try to actively disqualify them. And you should never present until they've qualified through pain, which, as you know, Timothy, as a Sandler advocate, pain is a huge part of what Sandler's about, and really what all buying decisions are about. So for those of you that aren't Sandler folks, pain is the problems that they have that you can solve. The only pains that matter are the ones that you can solve. If you can't find 3 to 5 pains, they're probably not going to be a good prospect for you, and you need to disqualify them. And then it's about money, right? We talked about money earlier. And in budget step, it's not just about money, but it's about what I really think Sandler should call the budget step the sacrifice step,
Huh.
because they have to make sacrifices in 3 areas: money, time, and resources. And if they're not both what Sandler calls willing and able to make sacrifices in money, time, and resources, they're not a good prospect for you. And so you can disqualify them right there. Yet too many salespeople, by the way, so I want to mention this, you've got to be careful there's a difference between a budget spender and a budget holder. A budget spender is somebody who has authorized to spend money. A budget holder gets to control the purse strings and decide where that money's spent. And they tell the budget spender where it's okay to spend it. So never take no from a budget spender. You always have to make sure that the person you take a no from, it has the ability to say yes before you can accept the no. So you've got to make sure you get to a budget holder who has the ability to say yes before you can ever accept a no. So if they're not willing and able to sacrifice money, time, and resources, you have to disqualify them. And then the decision-making process, it's kind of funny. My son's going to be a senior this year, and I'm finding out that journalism is a lost art at high schools. It's not something very many kids take, and they only offer it a little bit now. But my son's buddy takes it, and they still teach the same things. And these 6 things they teach about how to write a good story for journalism is the same 6 things that we need to know about a customer's decision-making process. And that is who, what, where, when, why, and how. Those 6 things, if you can't answer those 6 things about the customer's decision-making process, you have more work to do. And then you have to decide if the who, what, where, when, why, and how of their decision-making process fits into how you make sales. For example, I was recently asked to participate in a reverse auction. You ever heard of a reverse auction?
I am not. You're going to have to enlighten me.
This is horrible. This is the worst thing ever. So a reverse auction is what I call a blindfolded, hands tied behind your back, wearing cement shoes, race to the bottom of the ocean. And what happens is they'll develop a scope of work. They'll invite 3, 4, 5 companies to come into a auction to bid on the job. We're going to start at $250,000, and then the companies bid down.
Right.
And lowest bidder wins. It's a horrible way to sell. And so for myself, I won't participate in a reverse auction. I know more and more companies.
Neither do we. We don't submit any bids because we don't even get to talk to them. So what's the point?
That's right. And so you have to decide if their decision-making process fits into your sales template. If it doesn't, they're disqualified. And so the only time we should be presenting is if they qualified in pain or problems, 3 to 5 of them that we can solve. They've qualified in budget or sacrifice around money, time, and resources. And they have a decision-making process, the 6 items I just talked about, that you want to participate in. If they've done all those things, then they have earned the right to see your presentation, but not before that.
Wow, I see exactly why, like I said, most entry-level sales reps sort of stay entry-level because they're not learning from the mistakes, right? And I think you're in the best spot ever because SaaS companies hire hundreds of SDRs. I mean, they're not hiring 2 or 3. They're going for like a whole class of 2020. Bring them in.
They do tend to. I just saw that I just read an article yesterday that the average SDR in what we call the Valley or the Silicon Valley, right? The average SDR in the Silicon Valley stays in their seat for 11 months.
See, like I said, you're kind of hiring anyone breathing at that point because you're sort of training them to do the job because they don't come knowing anything about sales. They don't. They just look at a job and say, right. So, and these mistakes you're going to make, in other words, because you're just looking for activity at that point. Really, it's not even the achievement. Did you make 100 calls? Well, great. Let's go. Tomorrow, do the same thing again. And the day after. And if you just do that, you're going to win. You're going to be getting the trophy at the end of the month. Any final thoughts on sales in general? Any tidbits that you can share to anyone listening today? Jeff, this has been an awesome session.
Well, thanks. I appreciate you having me on. I think, the other thing that we haven't talked about that I would mention is a salesperson, there's 2 ways to listen. There's listening to respond, and there's listening to comprehend. And most salespeople listen to respond in that they listen to, on average, the first 7 seconds of a customer's or prospect's response before they start forming the response in their own head. And they've missed the rest of the customer's response because they're so busy thinking about what they're going to say because they're terrified of silence.
It's true.
And what I'll tell you is if that's listening to respond, if you want to be successful in sales, listen to comprehend. At the end of the customer's turn to talk, take a pause and do what I call listen and let it land. In that 3 to 5 seconds, what Sandler will call 5 seconds of guts, right, of silence. In that 3 to 5 seconds, you can then start forming your response and start to talk. When you do that, your customer doesn't think it's awkward or weird. They actually think that you were giving careful thought and consideration to what they had just said before you replied, and you didn't just reply off the hip. And so I would tell you the most important skill in sales, qualifying, paying, leaving your child in the car, those are all important. But listening to comprehend is probably the most important thing you can do in sales, and it'll be the fastest way for you to build trust in sales.
Right. And also to add to that, many times salespeople don't do what we call the active listening part, which is maybe you can explain. You're the trainer, Jeff. I'm actively doing that because I know about it, right? Like I have to reiterate some of this stuff because the client, is going to share it with me even more. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So active listening involves things like matching and mirroring their posture and how they're sitting or standing. If they're leaning forward, you lean in. If they're leaning back, you lean back, right? That's kind of matching and mirroring. Matching and mirroring also goes to the pace of the conversation. Some people are really fast talkers and some people are much slower. And so we want to be very conscious of that. And then the other part of active listening is when they talk, we listen to comprehend and we restate what they told us to make sure that we got it and that they agree with us that we got it. And that's why it's so important to listen to comprehend, because when we're listening to respond, we actually miss so much of what they're saying. So active listening, I guess, is probably, like I said, an incredibly important skill that most people miss.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for sparing some time this morning. I appreciate it, Jeff. Where can they find you?
You can find me on the web at Borovitz. Borovitz.sandler.com, or even easier is jeff.borovitz@sandler.com on email, or just link in with me on LinkedIn at Jeffrey Borovitz, San Francisco Bay Area. Love to hear from people and always enjoy talking to good salespeople.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Talk to you soon. All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.